In the quiet sanctuary of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista in Turin, Italy, lies a relic shrouded in mystery and steeped in controversy, the Shroud of Turin. This ancient linen cloth, displaying the enigmatic imprint of a tortured man, has captivated the religious, the skeptical, and the scientific community alike. Since its first documented exhibition in the late 14th century, the shroud has inspired awe and reverence, provoked skepticism, and sparked a complex debate that bridges faith and science. As it quietly rests under the watchful eyes of pilgrims and scholars, the Shroud of Turin invites us into a deep contemplation of history, authenticity, and the profound mysteries of the sacred. The Shroud of Turin, a highly controversial holy relic, has caused heated debates even within the Catholic Church. Over time, it faced skepticism as a possible forgery due to carbon dating tests, pointing to an origin roughly 800 to 1,000 years after Christ's era. However, recent evidence has emerged, bringing fresh perspectives on its authenticity. Interestingly, a member of the original examining team has boldly claimed that the testing process was flawed, rendering the results unreliable. To make matters more intriguing, the raw data from these tests remained hidden from the public for a staggering 27 years. There were even rumors of financial incentives given to the laboratories involved, possibly to perpetuate the notion that the Shroud of Turin is merely a medieval fabrication. This leads us to ponder, could there be government institutions with an interest in concealing the secrets behind the Shroud of Turin? Carefully preserved since the year 1578, the Shroud of Turin found its sanctuary in the royal chapel of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista. Its dimensions were awe-inspiring, stretching to a length of 4.3 meters and a width of 1.1 meters. What made it truly captivating, though, were the faint, brownish images that seemed to grace its surface. If one gazed upon the shroud, they would behold the ghostly impressions of a gaunt, sunken-eyed figure, a man standing at a height of 5 feet 7 inches. It was as if the shroud had borne witness to the last moments of life, with one half of the cloth showcasing the image of a body laid lengthwise, and the other half gracefully folding over to cover the entire front from face to feet. But that was not all. The images on the shroud were said to contain marks that were eerily reminiscent of the wounds endured during the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. There were thorn marks on the head, as though a crown of thorns had been painfully pressed upon it. Lacerations on the back seemed to speak of a brutal flogging, while bruises on the shoulders hinted at the weight of a heavy burden carried. The most poignant of all were the stains, believed to be blood, scattered across the shroud. These stains, it was whispered, were the sacred reminders of the ultimate sacrifice made for humanity. However, it is important to note that the Catholic Church does not take an official stance on the authenticity of the relic. The Church has refrained from asserting that it is anything beyond an icon of Christian devotion. They do acknowledge that millions of pilgrims see it as a symbol representing the mystery of the passion and death of the Lord. Since the late 19th century, scholars have delved into the shroud's mysteries, employing scientific methods in a quest to ascertain its authenticity. A remarkable observation surfaced in 1898 when experts noted that the sepia-tone images on the shroud bore an uncanny resemblance to photographic negatives rather than positive images. In 1988, the Vatican decided to address the authenticity question once and for all. They entrusted 3 laboratories in different countries with tiny samples of the shroud's linen cloth, each no bigger than a postage stamp. The purpose was to conduct carbon-14 dating on these samples and establish the shroud's age. Much to their collective astonishment, all 3 laboratories independently reached the same conclusion. The cloth had been woven between 1260 and 1390. However, here's the intriguing part. Despite the carbon dating results, scientists are unable to explain the image on the shroud. It displays a photographic negative of a body bearing wounds consistent with those that Christ would have had. While experts can confidently tell that the shroud is not from the time of Christ, they remain unable to definitively explain what it truly represents. For over a century, scientists have diligently pursued the investigation of this sacred relic, yearning for a definitive answer. Yet despite the employment of the most advanced scientific technology today, no one has managed to replicate the mysterious image it bears. Nevertheless, scientific progress has brought forth a gradual unveiling of new evidence, bolstering the case for the Shroud of Turin's authenticity. To begin, Let's consider the insights of Barry Schwartz, a member of the team that conducted the initial examination of the shroud. He served as the official photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project. The primary aim of their study was to ascertain the formation process behind the image on the shroud. Being a non-practicing Jew at that time, he had reservations about joining the team and doubted the authenticity of the shroud, assuming it was merely an intricate painting. Nevertheless, during their meticulous examination of the fabric, he stumbled upon one of the enduring mysteries of the image, which continues to captivate researchers to this day. He clarified that they utilized a specialized instrument designed for X-ray evaluation, capable of stretching the lights and darks of an image vertically into space in proportion to their density. Ordinarily, this process would lead to a distorted image, but with the shroud, a natural three-dimensional relief of a human figure became apparent. This indicates a significant correlation between the image's density, its lights and darks, and the distance between the cloth and the body. He stated that the only reasonable interpretation for this phenomenon is an interaction between the cloth and the body, ruling out the possibility of it being a mere projection, as photographs or artworks do not possess the same kind of information present in the shroud. Their initial search for evidence of paint, pigments, or binders that could imply artificial creation of the image yielded no results. Instead, their thorough examination revealed that the image was composed of yellow, discolored fibers, and the darkness of specific areas was determined by the concentration of these fibers. In essence, there was no evidence of any external substance or intervention that could explain the image's formation. Despite this finding, it was the radiocarbon test conducted 10 years after their examination that ultimately led to the conclusion that the shroud was not authentic. However, Barry highlights the suspicious aspect that it took an arduous 27 years under the Freedom of Information Act to obtain the raw data from the British Museum, which supervised the 3 labs conducting the radiocarbon testing. Such a prolonged delay in releasing the data is highly uncommon in scientific practice. Normally, scientists publish their work in journals and share the raw data, allowing other researchers to validate or expand upon their findings as a standard part of the scientific method. Once the raw data was finally obtained, it shed light on the reasons for the reluctance to release it. The data showed that the sample taken from the shroud was inhomogeneous, meaning it was a strip cut from the cloth with one date at one end and another date hundreds of years later at the other end of the strip. Consequently, there was no specific point on the strip that could be definitively linked to the date of the entire cloth. Furthermore, they did not take any control samples from other areas of the shroud, which is crucial for reliable radiocarbon dating. There is evidence in the corner where the sample was taken that shows the presence of interwoven cotton. This discovery contradicts Jewish law known as the mixing of the kinds, which prohibits combining wool with cotton or cotton with linen. A burial shroud of someone of high stature is supposed to be made of pure linen, but the finding of cotton in the corner implies that a repair or reweaving was done in that area. Consequently, the radiocarbon dating was performed on a repaired corner of the shroud, making it impossible to obtain an accurate date for any other part of the cloth. Immediately after the results were leaked, before their official publication, claiming that the shroud was medieval, suspicions arose regarding the motivations behind the research. The British Museum, particularly the Oxford Laboratory, one of the 3 labs involved in examining the shroud, received a substantial sum of £1 million from anonymous donors with the specific intention of debunking the shroud. This raises the question, could there be influential groups with vested interests in denying the authenticity of the shroud? Blue chemistry has also been employed in the search for evidence supporting the authenticity of the fabric. The blood stains found on it were of type EAB, a rarity among the general population, but more common among Jewish individuals. The blood exhibited an astonishingly vivid red color that defied normal aging, hinting at unimaginable suffering endured by the individuals wrapped within the shroud. The bloodstains cascading down the arms provided clear evidence of a cruel crucifixion, with the angle of the blood flow perfectly matching the movements of a crucifixion victim. Surprisingly, the bloodstains predated the image on the shroud, indicating that the unique image-forming process occurred precisely 72 hours after the blood came into contact with the cloth, leading to an astonishing transformation. Upon further investigation, researchers discovered a combination of travertine aragonite and Jerusalem limestone in the dirt found on the shroud, which is the same limestone found in Jesus' tombs in Jerusalem. This finding raised intriguing possibilities. Additionally, the fabric contained 49 different types of pollen, with 33 originating exclusively from Palestine and 3 unique to Jerusalem, potentially linking it to the infamous crown of thorns. Moreover, the utilization of advanced wide-angle X-ray scattering enabled researchers to achieve more accurate and dependable dating of the fabric. Physicists examined the eyes of the man depicted on the shroud and discovered faint traces of ancient coins used in Jewish burials during the 1st century, which matched the coins employed by Pontius Pilate during that era. Furthermore, the size of the shroud is remarkably close to an ancient unit of measurement, measuring 2 by 8 cubits. Notably, a 3-inch wide side strip on the shroud was sewn with a unique stitch that was exclusively used in Palestine during the 1st century, forging a strong connection to the past. Throughout centuries, artistic depictions of the crucifixion typically showed nails being driven through the palms. However, archaeological revelations have emerged, indicating that the nails were actually driven through the wrists, aligning with what is depicted on the shroud. The punctures around the head also perfectly match the shape of thorns, remarkably in line with the biblical narrative of the crown of thorns. Abrasions on the shoulders suggest the burden of carrying a heavy, rough object, possibly across blood-soaked soil, indicating moments of stumbling and falling. Wounds on the nose, potentially resulting from a fall or a beating, add another layer of authenticity to the shroud's narrative. Not to be overlooked, the side wound bears a striking resemblance to a 2-inch wide elliptical wound, reminiscent of a Roman spear. The reverse image on the shroud reveals a remarkable separation of blood and clear blood serum, mirroring the phenomenon witnessed when a person dies from a wound. This eerie resemblance to the biblical accounts, as described in John's Gospel, adds to the enigmatic allure of the shroud. All these astounding details come together to portray a single man and an extraordinary historical tale, the story of Jesus Christ. Hidden within the fabric, researchers have also uncovered remarkable discoveries, inscriptions that defy explanation. 3 distinct lines below and beside the chin reveal clear and precise writings. How did they decipher these markings? By carefully dividing the shroud's official photographs into countless squares and using advanced visualization techniques to analyze their optical characteristics, Barbara Frail, a researcher from the Vatican, employed computer-enhanced images of the shroud to decipher faintly written words in Greek, Latin, and Aramaic, scattered across the cloth. According to her findings, the words include the name Jesus of Nazareth in Greek. She asserts that this finding dismisses the possibility of the text being of medieval origin, because no Christian at that time, even a forger, would have mentioned Jesus without acknowledging his divinity. To do otherwise would risk being branded a heretic. In addition, she extracted the words from enhanced photos of the shroud and presented them to experts, who agreed that the writing style was typical of the Middle East in the 1st century, which corresponds to the time of Jesus. And so, the question emerges: how did the image appear on the fabric in the first place? Countless theories have been put forth in an attempt to unravel the mystery behind its formation. In 2002, Raymond Rogers from the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, a prominent figure in the scientific testing of the shroud, argued that a simple chemical transformation could account for the image. He proposed that even moderate heat, perhaps around 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature that a dead body could briefly attain if it experienced hyperthermia or dehydration, might be enough to discolor the sugary carbohydrate compounds on the surface of cotton fibers. Rogers insisted that it doesn't require a miracle. While this idea is reassuringly mundane, there is little evidence supporting it in this specific context. After all, it's not a common occurrence, being observed on funeral shrouds.
Another theory posits that the discoloration of the fibers resulted from a chemical reaction with a substance emitted from the body. In the early 1900s, French biologist Paul Vignon proposed that this substance might have been ammonia, generated from the breakdown of urea in sweat. However, this explanation falls short, as the image produced would be too blurry. In 1982, biophysicist John DeSalvo suggested an alternative. The substance could be lactic acid from sweat. This compound is known for producing dark, negative images, like the Volkringer images of plant leaves, that are left between the pages of a book for an extended period, where substances exuded from the leaf react with paper fibers. However, one particular explanation stands out. A researcher named John Jackson concluded that vacuum UV radiation remains the sole plausible explanation for the formation of the image. To transform linen into a perfectly photographically sensitive material, light radiation is required, but it must be devoid of any accompanying heat radiation. To produce the image on the shroud, an astounding amount of approximately several billion watts of light radiation would be required, surpassing anything known from UV radiation sources today. If the accompanying heat energy were present, the cloth would have vaporized in an unimaginably brief span, less than 1/40 billionth of a second. Such a process would demand a magnitude of power greater than the total electrical energy generated by our entire planet combined. It becomes evident that only a miracle from the Almighty God could account for such a phenomenon. The Shroud of Turin, to some, may be dismissed as a fake, but for millions of devoted believers, it stands as an unparalleled symbol of the profound sacrifice made by Jesus to redeem humanity. It transcends mere fabric and becomes a timeless testament of faith, inspiring hearts and souls throughout the ages. The Garden of Eden, the legendary paradise described in the Bible, has long been considered a mythological place. But what if we told you that it's not just a mere story? Recently, an incredible discovery has been made that has the potential to change our understanding of history and religion forever. In this video, we'll take you on a journey to explore the fascinating story behind this discovery and the evidence that supports it. So get ready to have your mind blown as we uncover the truth about the Garden of Eden. One subject that is sure to fire a cold conversation up is if the Garden of Eden ever existed. To religious people, it may be a no-brainer, but even those that do not believe in the Christian God may still believe in its existence. After all, there had to be some geographical location that gave credence to the Bible stories, and thus the arguments. It certainly hasn't missed the attention of scientists who've been searching ancient texts for hints and any references that could help with identifying the location of the garden. And as it turns out, recent work in the fields of remote sensing archaeology and DNA studies has offered some strong indications as to where it is, and what they found is truly terrifying. The Garden of Eden is a paradise on earth, described in the Old Testament book of Genesis as being inhabited by Adam and Eve, the first humans created by God before they were banished for breaking God's laws. It is also referred to as the Garden of God and the Garden of Yahweh, the God of Israel in Genesis and Ezekiel, respectively. The word Edith is mostly derived from the Sumerian word Eden, which means blame, and the Akkadian word Adino, which is a loaned word from Sumerian. Following the Genesis account of the creation and fall of man, rivers gushed from Eden to the east of Israel and all the way to the four corners of the globe. Similar towns found in the Sumerian archives suggest that the mythology of the ancient Middle East contained the idea of an earthly paradise. There have been hundreds of claims from many regions that suggest their areas as the actual locations of humanity's first home. Some of the most well-known claims are from Iraq and the Persian Gulf, Bahrain, Iran, Anatolia, Armenia, Turkey, Jerusalem, East Africa, and even the Isle of Lewis in Scotland and Jackson County in Missouri. But there has been little evidence to support those claims, leading many to wonder if you would ever be able to find out with certainty where the Garden of Eden was located. However, there had been credible theories about its location using the hints provided in the biblical text. It seems the age-old question might have had an obvious solution from the start. The most obvious hints are the rivers that were mentioned in the biblical texts, which are supposedly still identified in the Bible. According to the Bible's book of Genesis, the Gardens of Eden is located in southern Mesopotamia, which in modern day is known as Iraq. The exact location of the garden is currently believed to be 35 miles north of Mosul, Iraq, and roughly an hour's drive from Islamic State control. There are two rivers mentioned in the biblical text. That indicates that the Persian Gulf's head could be a possible location. The first is the river Tigris, which translates to Haidakal of Eden, and the second is the Great Euphrates River, which means the Paraph of Eden. However, it was revealed during Morgan Freeman's The Story of God series that when archaeologists dug the area, they were shocked at what they found. They found a site dating back 11,000 years, located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. It is believed that more than 12,000 years of Sumerian, Assyrian, Chaldean, Persian, and Arab civilizations have grown and fallen on their periphery. Some anecdotal evidence also shows that organized farming, the early cities, and writing could have all started in this region. However, despite being depicted in the history books as a predominantly peaceful place, the current state of the home of the Garden of Eden is the complete opposite. Modern-day Iraq is a nation that's come to be associated with sectarian killing, suicide bombers, kidnappings, and refugees. The brutal after-effect of one of the most contentious and emotionally charged wars in recent history. Most of the damage done to the Mesopotamia region, especially the two main rivers mentioned in the biblical text, can be traced back to the actions of Iraq's most prominent dictator, Saddam Hussein, to punish the locals for supporting an uprising against his rule. Saddam diverted the area's water in the 1990s, causing it to drain. His government and soldiers drained thousands of square kilometers of marshland that had once been supplied by the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. The UN classed it as a cultural and ecological catastrophe, on par with the disappearance of the Aral Sea or the devastation of the Amazon rainforest. Even seasoned engineers acknowledged that they were astounded by what Saddam's soldiers had accomplished. Saddam's soldiers removed 6,000 square kilometers of wetlands, an amazing feat of engineering and a huge task. They created new rivers, diverted the Euphrates away from the marsh, and intercepted the Tigris. They also burned the region's reed beds, and his dictatorship misrepresented it as increasing agricultural land availability, when in reality he was attempting to deny his opposition a base of operations, despite the very obvious environmental harm being done by Saddam. Pressed on with his agenda because this project was political and spiteful, according to historians, the marsh region had developed into a new hub of the Iraqi opposition by the 1990s and was predominantly populated by rebels. Luckily, Saddam was deposed before he could completely ruin the entire area, but there's no doubt that he did some remarkable damage to the region, which is believed to have housed the Garden of Eden. By the time he was removed from office, around 80,000 Madar, or marsh Arabs, had lived there, in towns and on floating islands, in 1991, when 450,000 people relied on the marshes were left displaced. 30,000 refugees went to the US and 70,000 to Iran. The remainder were relocated. The population of the biggest city had fallen from 67,000 to just 6,000 by 2003. With restorative efforts going on, the marshlands of southern Iraq were listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2016. Because of their variety and long history, part of its history goes beyond its connections to the ancient garden. The marshes are a part of Iraq's wild, wild east, a remote anarchic area where poor populations have a history of rejecting authority, according to British forces stationed there. To restore the marshes, the UN started an $11 million effort that included eliminating some of the obstructions that were preventing the water from entering the area.
They are aiming to reverse the effects of a series of dams Turkey and Syria built to channel the water of the great Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And although water has resumed flowing through the marshes, its glow is nowhere near what it once was. Sadly, the region, which was only just recovering from Hussein's vindictive political actions, is now under a new threat. Marshes that were revitalizing themselves a few years ago with UN assistance are now merely vast stretches of cracked earth. The purported location of the garden was being hit by severe droughts. The devastating drought has ravaged a large portion of Iraq and neighboring nations over the previous years, and now spread through southern Iraq, affecting thousands of residents of the area known as Marsh Arabs. Huge sections of the formerly green Hizaiwa marshes, in the previously lush wetlands, are now surrounded by dry stream beds, and its vegetation is turning yellow. The local Lake Umalnaz has been reduced to muddy puddles among mostly dry terrain. Tourist-friendly sections of the Gibbage marshes are experiencing the same fate. According to a resident who lives in a village next to Hawaiza, the marshes were their livelihood. They used to fish there. However, according to academics, the farmers and fishermen could be the ones destroying what's left of Iraq's marshes by utilizing unrestricted chemical use and electric shocks while fishing. These illegal practices are inadvertently killing animals, contaminating water, and risking human health, and hindering the restoration of one of the greatest wetlands in the world. The Iraqi government is adamant that all the troubles of the past will soon be history, and that the supposed home of the Garden of Eden in Babylon, the birthplace of civilization, will develop into a tourist heaven. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey to uncover the truth about the Garden of Eden. We hope that this discovery has challenged your beliefs and opened up new perspectives on history and religion. While there is still much to learn and explore about this fascinating topic, we hope that this video has provided you with a glimpse into the potential realities of the past.